what happens for me in these meditation times is I find myself occasionally, not always, sometimes I'm very much in the flow and very deep into the silence. And other times I'm restless and I want to hear you speak, and I want to hear all of us with each other uh, discuss what we're here, not necessarily for, but just the inquiry that goes on. And I think my question right now is if you could speak to, I know Papaji was very adamant about being quiet and, kind of remembering to get off the train and get quiet. Um, so I wondered if maybe you could talk to the power of silence in the teaching kind of river as a teaching tool for us, or for, just to give it some body, because I sometimes get sort of vague around. I mean, we all know that meditation is a valuable asset, but I also think that there's a real pointing in, or I sense that there's a real pointing in the teaching that kind of would enhance my experience of meditation. I don't know if that makes sense, and if you have questions of me, please ask, but it seems like a really important issue, and so I thought I'd bring it up.
It's almost as if there is a map which points to the silence. And there is the silence itself. It's as if you're asking to talk about it as opposed to simply being immersed in it, as it. So this silence that we begin satsang with it is the thing itself, so to speak, and it is also in behalf of quieting the mind so the words that are spoken pointing to it are not obscured by the chattering of the monkey mind, if you will. It's to quiet that down so the words are received, so the pointings are received. This silence at the beginning already always is, except that we tend to overlook it chronically, habitually, that we are in some ways addicted to the thinking, to the mind stream. We take ourselves to be this very mind stream. We take ourselves to be the one that the mind stream is about, this me character, this I character. Satsang is in behalf of pointing to not the one that's found in the story, but the one that's found within the silence itself. And to recognize that is your essential nature, your Buddha nature, the one, this one that cannot be spoken. So the silence is the thing itself. The words are an attempt to redirect the attention away from the mind stream, which is habitually followed outward, and redirect the attention back unto its own source. Making sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's this coming home, this coming to rest, coming to this easy, spacious awareness that I am, that I am, the I am that you are, that you are, that you are, that I am. I am speaks to this presence. I am that I am. So the mind is or can be a demanding thing, demanding in the sense that it demands our attention. So, in a sense, I go to war with that one, that demanding mind that requires our attention. And I go to war with it by first befriending it.
Maybe we could use a different word than war.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a war of friendship.
A war of friendship.
It's saying that this thinking, which has an apparent life of its own, is not that which we are.
Right.
And the friendship is saying there is this immensity of spaciousness wherein there's plenty of room for the mind to do its mind thing and have it not be in the slightest way a disturbance. So we're sitting in the beginning of satsang in silence, and this disturbing mind is settling, settling, settling. And then, whoa, it rears its head once again. Hanuman speak, it's enough time in the silence, it's time for what's next. For that is often what the mind's demand is in one guise or another. It's time, it's time. So it's bringing us back into time. It's time for what's next. And this is the way we habitually live our lives. We're one step ahead. For in reality, real life is just this simple moment, this now, this eternal, timeless now. And then the mind arises, no, that is not enough for me. I want what's next. Or potentially, I would like to ruminate on what was. There wasn't enough rumination time. So the mind has this a kind of maniacal task to make of life something that is much more about the past and future than about this simple moment. So the speaking time of satsang begins, and quite often a distinction is then made early on or again and again, this distinction between the scene, the objects that appear in awareness, which in this case we're speaking of this thinking mind, thoughts. And a distinction is made between the the thoughts and the awareness in which the thoughts are displaying. And always the pointing that you are the very awareness in which those thoughts are appearing. So you, Peter, you're speaking, if I'm remembering correctly, that the content of the mind stream, the content of the thoughts that you were speaking of are the thoughts that say enough of this silence, more of the speaking. I hope I'm speaking to what you were asking.
Yeah, you are.
I think it's an essential and an essential pointing.
Indeed.
So we speak, we utilize the mind in behalf of quieting the mind, and we utilize the mind by speaking to it. Brother, there's room for you here. You can do your mind thing. You don't have to do anything whatsoever. And also, you can come to rest in the silence as the mind thing is doing its thing. Chattering. The aspect of mind I'm speaking to is that psychological mind that has to do with our identity. I'm not speaking of the mind that's being such an immense ally and can be used in such amazing, awesome, creative ways. I'm talking about the one that has to do with identification. So I'm wanting to speak something that ultimately cannot be said. And it can be pointed to, and it already always is. But that which I'm speaking of, it has no name, it has no form, it cannot be described, it has no qualities or characteristics. It is that which you are that I am. So these teachings are about the realization that which I have always taken myself to be, I never was in truth, that I've always been that which I always and already am, which is this presence, this awareness, this simple, easy contentment. It's all very ultimately, it's all very simple, very obvious. These teachings are the least complicated things I could imagine. And the realization somehow does not occur through the activity of attempting to figure it out. The attempt to figure it out is simply more of the mind's activity in that particular guise. Could you ask me again what you asked me at the beginning?
It has to, it's what you're speaking to exactly, really, but the question had to do with kind of um, riffing on the subject of silence as a teaching itself, which, again, gets caught up in the mind wanting to capture the, and my experience, what you're speaking to right now has to do with kind of in my words, the leap that I have to take in recognizing that my mind cannot construe the presence in form. It wants to it wants to figure this out. You're quite right about that. And I know better. I've been around long enough to know better, but I'm still this I think what I was fishing for has to do with just really honoring the time that we take in silence and kind of beyond just well, no, my words aren't going to even work. But thank you for addressing the matter,
Mm.
such as it is. But I think it's so core, as you've just spoken. And I mean, you've spoken such a core a core element of what satsang bring or is about, really. It's, and I thank you for that. It's lovely to hear you speak about it, and also your experience coming from the master and bringing it through. It just gives it infusion of energy and life.
Mm.
Not that it needs it because it's already here, but there we are. Thank you.
How would you answer this if I were to ask you, brother, has this realization already occurred for you? And I'm misspeaking in the asking, but you know the gist of it.
Hmm. Yes, it has already occurred. But then I go into, back into mind and experience and sitting with you and everybody in this room, um, and wanting to, I don't know. It just feels like such a sacred um, part of our getting together, and then I kind of lose sight of that occasionally, and I get into, oh, I wish we could get into more conversation. When in fact the silence holds all of it, and so no conversation is needed. We could probably just meet in silence for the whole time. But I do appreciate the dialogue and the I think my mind, I should clarify that my mind likes to chew on these matters.
I don't think for most folks or anyone, there is great entertainment value found in the silence. The entertainment value is found more often in the dialogues.
Right. Probably so. When in fact the silence is the pearl.
The silence is the pearl, and we put immense value on entertainment.
Correct. Yeah.
And yet it is in the dialogues that hopefully the teachings are imparted in part. The teachings, as in my own experience, sitting at the feet of the master, were imparted in those two ways. One was just to absorb. It feels like absorbing that transmission, and also through the words that he was speaking. And he had a masterful use of language. To convey the liberating aspect of the teachings. I would like to be reassured that each and every one who has joined together all these years has already come to realize, doubtlessly, one's own true nature. And if not, would be willing to engage with me. I fear from time to time that there are folks who have not yet come to this realization on the one hand, and on the other hand, hesitate to reveal that and engage with me in the hopes of that so-called event called self-realization would occur, because one is shy or embarrassed or given up, or it matters to me so much in that I know the suffering of seeking, and I know the liberation of having the search come to an end. So it's reassuring to me, Brother Peter, that you this notion that one is not supposed to, once realization occurs, there would no longer be any time of so-called misidentification, or there should not be any more time of human suffering. I think that these notions get perpetuated by, well, in all kinds of ways. But it's not the truth. anything can and does and will appear. And that has nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that one's true nature is untouched by any of that. Say, in other words, you could see that the snake is a rope. You could see that doubtlessly. And that doesn't mean that sometimes that rope appearing as snake won't evoke all kinds of fear and trepidation. And still we know the snake is a rope. And once remembered 10,000 times, 10,000 times we are liberated from that fear. The mind comes in and says, well, I would like this once and for all, rather than again and again.
Well, and the culture, the satsang culture or whatever, often speaks to, well, not always, but sometimes speaks to, achieving enlightenment. And I've had to really kind of let that one go
Well,
because it
we
was
know,
a trap. It was a trap for me.
yeah, well, we know that the big joke, which we know, is that there is no one to get enlightened
Right.
in the same way that ultimately there was never anyone who was ever in bondage. It was all some maddening play, some Leela that at times seems so utterly insane. And all the time, nothing happened. I've always remained as I am.
And do you find in your experience that that is running for you on a daily basis, that you're having that awareness?
Say it in a different way. So I didn't get it.
Yeah. Um,
You're inquiring about my experience on a daily basis.
yeah, of the I suppose the duality, but it doesn't need to, you don't need to go there. No, it's more mind.
I, I, I get a sense of what you're asking, and I could answer truthfully that I am just as you are in an absolute sense and in a relative sense. My humanity is utterly vulnerable and sensitive and capable of feeling tremendously intensely every and anything. So I'm inviting you to answer that, ask the question again, so it's satisfied, and that if there's some revelation that seems like a confession, I am happy to make it to you, brother.
Well, it has to do, you were just saying the experience of the deep humanity of existence and the nervous system and the response system in the body and the suffering that can go on, whilst the awareness is in concert going on too.
Yes.
So it's kind of like how to, for me, it's a continual kind of wanting to remind myself that I'm not this story. I'm not having, I mean, I'm having these real experiences or seemingly real experiences of the suffering for myself and for the collective. But I'm also aware that this awareness is holding everything. So it's just, I was kind of asking, I suppose some way, I'm wondering if, and you did, you spoke to your experience and again, God, these words are just so not adequate, but how to, in the moment when you're in the deep of the depths, as all I'm doing right now is I'm really recognizing that these, uh, I call them weather patterns, come through, and it's, I'm still the sky.
That's right.
So it's kind of like, um, wondering what your experience is when how you recalibrate in the moments of being so identified and you know pause, do you breathe, do you have, I suppose I'm wanting to talk about technique, but that's silly. uh it's just,
Here's the thing. The answer is yes to everything, and at the same time, I'm seeing that it's all happening of itself, and that one that would normally at some point in some past that never in truth existed, that one is not in play, is not in charge. In other words, the illusory self is not in charge of course correction. That's all happening by some unseen hand, and that unseen hand has come to realize beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no course correction necessary.
oh yeah, that's good, that's good.
Course corrections, the notion, those come along these very natural experiences of the mind in one way or another communicating that this moment should somehow be showing up somehow different than it is. Hence, a course correction is necessary. Well, this moment isn't supposed to be showing up, can't be showing up, will never be showing up different than it is. It's always this. And the suchness of this moment is always the suchness of this moment, regardless of what the flavor is.
When you use the word course correction, I was thinking in terms of correcting my, correcting from identifying as person to identifying as awareness.
Why do
But
you,
that
why do
that
you,
that's
brother,
huh?
why do you want to be burdened with at this point in time, or at this point in timelessness? Why be burdened with that? You've already come to the end of the road.
Yeah, good point.
I think the answer is because that's how tricky the mind is.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's quite,
You can give the
huh?
mind its due and its uh, respect and acknowledgement at how brilliantly it does its job. I mean, really, and it's that very suffering born of that maniacal mind that
Yeah.
has provided ongoing fire and fuel and impetus and motivation to get free of it all.
When in fact it's already happened.
And we come to realize yeah, but and it's already happened. So
It's
it doesn't
it's
have
tricky business.
it's it is and it isn't.
Yeah,
Yes, and it
that's
isn't.
right. Yeah. It's not even business.
Sure.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for,
We haven't spoken at length in such a long time. It's a sheer pleasure for me, brother. We've been together a long time.
yeah. You know, we started with the silence business, and I'm so glad we got to explore that. And I also just really want to appreciate your delivery of what you've said this morning to me and to all of us, really, about this that we're talking about. It's just been really rich, and your your teaching or your um the way it's coming through you is just wonderful to receive.
I'm
And
glad to hear it.
yeah, it just is. And I have to be careful because the mind is like happy about getting some of the dialogue like we were talking about earlier. But it is beautiful to get the the download, if you will, when you're giving it and and also to be resting in the silence whilst that's going on.
Mm.
I love it. I just love it. I really do. This is something that I love most in life. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you.